My name is David William Brown, and I'm president of the Canadian Friends of the Mayanei Hayeshua Medical Center. We are pleased that you've taken the time this evening to learn about our institution and to hear from Dr. Strous, who will present a uniquely Jewish perspective on many of the issues and questions regarding mental health and the day-to-day impact on families coping with the current global medical crisis. Professor Strous will provide you with some practical takeaways, recommendations, and coping strategies dealing with mental health and the effects of the COVID-19 restrictions placed on children and family units. The Mayanei Hayeshua Medical Center was founded less than 30 years ago by the late Dr. Moshe Rothschild, Zichrono Livracha. It serves the greater Petach Tikva, Givat Shmuel, Bnei Brak, and Ramat Gan region and beyond. It is a growing 320-bed independent community hospital with 18 medical departments and 32 outpatient clinics. The hospital is recognized throughout the Israeli medical community as providing the highest quality in patient care. The recently built Mayanei Hayeshua Mental Health Center is the first and only culturally sensitive unit in the country, with an holistic approach to treating both adults and children in a safe and respectful environment, focusing on the dignity of human life without exception. The Mental Health Center at Mayanei Hayeshua is headed by our guest speaker this evening, Dr. Strous. Professor Strous is also a full professor in the Department of Psychiatry, Sackler Faculty of Medicine, Tel Aviv University. His impressive credentials include a psychiatry residency at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, a clinical research fellowship in pharmacology at Harvard Medical School in Boston, and a master's in health administration from Ben-Gurion University. Professor Strous has published extensively and is a current member in both the international and local medical societies. He is editor of the Israeli Journal of Psychiatry and heads the National Ethics Committee of the Israel Psychiatric Association. Professor Strous is of the firm belief that mental health and mental illness is absolutely manageable. Professor Strous has published extensively, and his papers are referred to by physicians worldwide. Most recently, Professor Strauss's paper entitled "The Ethics of Sharing Medical Knowledge with the Community: Is the Physician Responsible for Medical Outreach During a Pandemic?" has been published in the Lancet Medical Journal in July 2020. In addition to all of his academic and medical achievements, Professor Strous is an avid marathon runner. He runs 5 kilometers every morning before Shacharit and is a regular participant in the Jerusalem Marathon and has participated in marathons all around the globe. Tonight, we are fortunate to have the opportunity to hear and interact with Professor Strous. We thank him for accommodating our schedules and speaking with us at 7 p.m. our time, which is 2 a.m. in the morning Israeli time. When we approached the professor and asked if he would rest this time in order to accommodate us, he did not hesitate. And for this, we are very grateful. Professor Strous will be speaking to us for approximately 35 to 40 minutes, after which he will answer any questions which have been submitted through the chat function of Zoom. We will endeavor to cover as many questions as possible in the total 1-hour time allotted for this webinar. It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Strous to address us.
Thank you, David. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be with you this evening and to share some of our experience and information about this black swan event that has affected us internationally on the local scene, most importantly, but around the world. And this is the event of our generation that is in some ways defining much of what is going on at both the local and international level for some time. There's lots to be said about the corona and the COVID crisis, and there are many different levels to address this crisis. And may I even add opportunity, and more about that later. In order to do that, to cut to the chase, the approach that I'd like to do this evening is, before we open for questions, is to firstly address the direct neuropsychiatric aspects of corona, and then how it affects people, the immediate response, the immediate how people are affected. Then we'll talk about emotional responses. Then I would like to address the issues that children experience within the crisis, and then maybe how we some ideas of how we can manage the crisis and perhaps even grow from it. So the initial dealing with the neuropsychiatric aspects is a whole subject in itself, and we won't go into much depth. But just to say that, just like any kind of flu, any viral infection, people feel malaise, people feel flat, even down, and that's something that people directly experience in many cases of corona. But then there's something more unique about corona, which makes it in a class of its own, and that is some of the catastrophic responses that some people are experiencing. I think that when we look at anxiety in a situation, you can hear from my accent, I come from Africa. So, when you're in the middle of a forest and a lion runs at you, so there are a number of different approaches, a number of different responses. So you can, if you feel no anxiety, you stop, you don't do anything, the lion eats you up, not good. If you feel too much anxiety, you freeze, you don't run away, the lion eats you up, not good. But if you go into the local supermarket to buy some milk or chocolate, and you feel as if a lion is running after you, that's also not good, because you develop a response to the threat as if there's a lion, but there's no lion. But what you do need to do is, if there is a lion running after you, it's some inbuilt natural response to put on your running shoes and get out of there as soon as you can to save yourself from that lion. So too little anxiety, too much anxiety, or anxiety not in the correct place is not good, is maladaptive. And that's what we're seeing in many situations. So it's good to feel anxious, because that it's teaching you, it's telling you to respond to some kind of threat, to some kind of outside something that is putting you in some kind of danger. But people responding sometimes either too little, so they're not taking the care that they should, too much with panic reactions, sometimes there's specific phobias, people engage in sometimes obsessive behaviors, and then there's post-trauma at the time itself, and then that's something that lingers on for later. So all those kinds of responses can be maladaptive. Now we know, for example, in Israel, when there's a terrorist attack, people talk about, unfortunately, some people are killed, some people are injured, mild, moderate, severe, and then, but sometimes, it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people. But then there's only 50 people with emotional responses or stress or reactions or traumatic responses. Now, those people who break legs or get injured, they usually heal pretty quickly. But those who have these emotional reactions, these post-traumatic reactions, sometimes can last for years and years and years. And unfortunately, based on the stigma of mental illness, people and community don't respond, aren't as sensitive to this. And we're seeing a lot of that now with corona as well, that people get over the initial stage, and then there's certain stress reactions or post-traumatic reactions that last longer. Anxiety, depression, we're seeing that later on, even suicide in very rare kind of situations. But so the emotional load linked to the COVID pandemic sometimes can affect vulnerable people beyond their points of resistance, leading to these kind of severe reactions. But then there's the opposite as well. Sometimes people don't respond, when they don't respond enough, either related to not understanding the situation, personality issues. Sometimes people are psychotic, but that's something more specific. So we do see, though, that the stress itself sometimes can trigger mental illness, and that's something that we have to deal with as well. And you know, the whole mental illness or the emotional response of related to corona is something that's only now people are being understanding of and are being sensitive and realizing that it has to be addressed. Not only just the acute kind of inflammatory reaction or autoimmune reaction or whatever it is. It's just so much we don't know yet and understand about corona. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional responses to corona and how that affects, in particular, children and then other generations. So first of all, if we look at the more extremes of the age, the younger and the elderly, so there's a massive loss of routine. So the going to school, going to work, having the grandchildren coming home, having the routine of family kind of interaction, that is lost. And that is very stressful for people. Now, there's certain personality types or conditions that this is particularly difficult. For example, those on the autistic spectrum, but all children and all adults, and especially the elderly, the routine is very important. So the loss of routine throws people off. And people find it very difficult to deal with, and there's so much we don't know still, and things changing all the time, and that is a massively destabilizing factor for everyone. And then there's a fear of death. People feel out of control. People don't feel that they have the control, and children need to know that even their parents, if they don't have the control, their parents are, and their parents for sure aren't in control. Not even the government is in control, because we really don't know exactly how to deal with this. The situation is not being managed in the most optimal fashion. Part of it because corona is such a new situation, this pandemic, and it's thrown all of us for a loop. This feeling of being helpless, that there's no real treatment right now, and anything that we're reaching out for, we're not sure, and there's unknown, and the deaths are just increasing, and the morbidity is increasing, and we can't prevent this. People feel, sometimes, when there's situations, when they're car accidents, you say, okay, we can prevent that by driving slower, not using alcohol, making sure you cross at the right place. But here, people feel, and rightfully so, we really can't prevent this. You really don't have, you don't know. You can't just cut yourself off from the world and stay in your room. You have to be out there for a number of reasons. You have to go shopping. You have to buy that food and to earn that living. And we don't have that control. And that's very scary for children in particular. The dread of the unknown. The rules have changed right now, and it's going to be changed for some time. The fear of isolation, people who have been isolated themselves and gone into quarantine, that is very scary. That is very, very difficult for many people. And just the fear of maybe that could happen to me, the fear of not getting the help that I need. We know that right now that there are less mental health services available. They're less accessible. So people feel that if they do feel stressed, and when they are anxious and depressed, that help is not out there. At the best of times, sometimes psychiatric service or mental health services are not as accessible immediately as they are when you break a leg. You break a leg, you get managed straight away. You need a psychologist. Sometimes it can take a couple of weeks or even months in certain situations to get that kind of help, especially in some kind of government services or public mental health services. And a lot of people don't know where to get that help right now, because a lot of the infrastructure of medical services, in particular mental health, have broken down. And then there's a stress in the family that what keeps people together and gives them the stability in life as the family. But the family, everyone's on top of each other. People are stuck at home together. There's the financial stress. Many people are unemployed. The relationship issues. When sometimes there's a vulnerable relationship and people are stuck together at home, a lot of these things become particularly unstable. A lot of frustration around the world. There's a lot of family violence that has come to the fore right now. And essentially, what we're really talking about is a loss There's a massive loss of what was before, and people are dealing with a new reality. And it's now setting in. It's not just the first few weeks we say, okay, maybe this will go away when the summer came, because it didn't. In fact, it even was compounded. So, you know, Kubler-Ross's stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance, resignation, which many people know about, actually has an important role to help us understand really what's going on here. And I think that, I don't think, you know, everything I'm saying many people will know, and it's not new, but I think sometimes when we discuss some of the issues, we say, wow, you know, if we can understand and have some kind of sense of what I'm going through and what my children are going through and what my parents are going through, or what all the generations and what the systems are going through, it helps us gain some further understanding. So if you look at the Kubler-Ross stages, for example, in terms of denial, that, you know, some people, those who sometimes accept the danger of the contagious illness or the infectiousness, they sometimes externalize the responsibilities that I need to take under the situation, and they assume that it's someone else's obligation to make better now, and someone else's obligation to impede these viruses getting around. So people don't take responsibility for themselves. And that, for example, in many countries around the world, is why we're seeing this massive second wave, so to speak, of increasing cases, and in particular amongst the youth, because the youth feel invincible. The youth feel, you know, wow, you know, I don't see so many people my age getting so sick, and if they get sick, no one gets really sick, even though that's not true, by the way. Sometimes young people can get really, really sick and even die from a virus. But they don't see it directly. So it's, well, someone else. So the youth don't keep something often to the rules, and that causes a lot of guilt for themselves when they know that they may be exposed to the older generation, their parents and their grandparents. So sometimes those with a psychological dimension or of external locus of control, they also sometimes put the responsibilities on someone else. So if your locus of control, where you feel the control in your life is, it's on someone else, it's not you, you don't take responsibility over this and saying, you know, I'm not just looking after myself, I need to actually look after the community, because that's the bigger picture we're looking at. And then if you go further, there's the anger, there's the bargaining. Do I really need to do this? Maybe I can do that, or maybe don't really. And then the people get depressed, because really there's so much that's been lost under the current situation, and because of the change, the loss is the change, the loss of what was. Now, the loss doesn't necessarily have to be something very bad. It could be just a change, and that the change is a loss of what was before. And for some people, that's really, really difficult. And then at the end, you can decide: am I going to be just resigned to this? This has been the reality, or am I going to say, no, I'm going to accept this? And this is really what mindfulness is about, to say, I'm going to be in the present. I'm going to look at the situation. I'm going to say, how can I do best in this current situation? How can I manage this to the best of my ability? So that is a positive way to say, okay, I'm seeing this as an opportunity, and I'm going to try to come out of it stronger for me, for my children, and all the generations that perhaps are relying on me, around me, in my family. So let's talk a little bit now about children, because the children we see them as resilient, but that's not always the case. And we want to help foster that kind of resilience in the children. So when you talk about loss, if we're looking about this model, like, what are the children losing? So first of all, going back to school now, that is not for everyone, because not everyone is going back to school, definitely not in all countries around the world. So, and even when you do go back to school, things are not like it was before. You can't have that closeness to your friends and your teacher, and that's a loss. There's a loss of the connection to friends and teachers, and children feel that, and adolescents definitely feel that, and even the younger children, even though they may not have the tools to express it, but they're definitely feeling that kind of loss. There's this loss of manner to express their connection to others. So even though they may still feel the connection to their friends and to their teachers, which is critical in the younger generation, they don't have a manner to express that connection. There's a loss of those hugs. And hugs doesn't necessarily mean the hugs putting your arms around someone, but there are a lot of connections that people have and intersocial interaction that are hugs for themselves, and not necessarily a physical hug, but because of the distancing, they can't express that. The loss of routine we discussed, the loss of freedom. Children are now controlled by the reality, and we know that there's a plexiglass phenomenon that sometimes, I mean, that's a more extreme, that people, the children have classes with this like kind of like booth around them. That is difficult. You know, it's funny in the beginning, it make like kind of amusement, it's the novelty, but it's limiting. And children, it's very difficult to limit them, and it's not a good thing to limit them necessarily. They need to feel that freedom. Children need to feel, you know, I can be out there, and I'm unlimited. That helps at a psychological level, and that is a very challenging thing for these children. The loss of discipline, you know. Children who happen to have their schooling done by Zoom, that you know, who's in control, and children stay up late, and that structure of the discipline of the school is gone, where they're stuck at home. And even when they start going back to school, they go back to school part of the time, and they don't have the connection necessarily with all the generations, including their grandparents, to help them with that, and to maintain that kind of discipline in certain situations. The loss of respect for stability of authority. Children are looking around, particularly the adolescents, and they're saying, you know, who's in control here? Things are just going from bad to worse in certain situations. You know, this has been going on for a long time, and you know, I don't have respect for those authoritative figures, be it in the government, be it at a national level, be it at a local level, even be it in my family. My parents are not giving me the answers. My parents don't know themselves. My parents are stressed. My parents have their own issues, financial, employment, stuck at home, change also for them, and who is there for me to respect? And then children fall apart because children need authoritative figures in some situation, and that's very, very difficult for many children. And then there's a loss of financial stability, because you can't hide things from children. You can't hide that. And when families are experiencing that, the children will pick it up, and that's a source of instability for them. So in that situation, obviously these things need to be spoken about. We'll come to that soon. And then there's the loss of their parents. Their parents that they knew before are not there. Their parents are either worrying about the older generation or worrying about them, constantly worrying. And then they're stuck at home, and when they're at home, they're working, you know, that instead of being at, you know, many parents are working from home now, and when parents are working, they're stressed, and the children are seeing their parents stressed, preoccupied with their work. And many parents are actually working many longer hours now that they're stuck at home. They're working day, afternoon, and even night, whereas before they would come home and their parents are available. Now their parents are not so available, and there's a loss of respect sometimes when so much has been done now by technology, and many parents don't get it as well as the children. So we see that, for example, in the immigrants in Israel, where sometimes the immigrant parents don't get the language that the children do, and that can also cause a breakdown of authoritative figures in the system, the family system. And we're seeing that around the Corona time as well, where technology is so natural for children, and the parents are not getting it. And then there's a loss of connection to grandparents. And that is what I want to talk about. How can we deal with it? So according to statistics in Canada, from 2017 at least, about 20%, about 7.5 million grandparents are in Canada. So for many, isolation is almost next to impossible. It's very difficult to do that. So especially since there are more than 400,000 multi-generational households in Canada where grandparents are involved. Grandparents are living with their children and grandchildren, and that's very difficult. And we call those grand families. So families in which grandparents or other extended family members perform many parental duties. So staying away from the children is very, very difficult. It's extremely difficult, but potentially dangerous. So with grandparents say that, you know, they're dying to see the children, the grandchildren, and that's okay, but you shouldn't be in a situation, as some say, to die to see them. So we have to find some kind of way to manage this crisis. So let's talk about how maybe we can approach, because that's very, very difficult. The grandchildren see the grandparents, and the grandparents see and they want that connection, but it's really not possible right now. It's really not possible because it's really dangerous. That, you know, even though that the younger are going back to school, and they're coming back, and then they're spreading the virus all over, and it's very dangerous. Whereas before, that the children were almost in capsules in the families, they could have the connection to the grandparents, but they can't really do that right now anymore because it's really dangerous. So how can we get around this? How can we come out of the situation and manage kind of these challenges? So I think that there are many different approaches that one can consider. First of all, and most importantly, I think that this whole coronavirus situation can be used as an opportunity to empower children to take charge of their own schedule, Zoom, email, digital lists, and connections in a creative manner with their grandparents. So there are many different approaches how we can say, how can we encourage that or foster that relationship with their grandparents, not just despite, but because of the situation, and make it even closer. So some have encouraged children and grandparents to cooperate and do homework together, for example, over Zoom or any kind of other digital manner of video communication, to make up for this loss of social contact. It can be done. So the rules are clear. Stay apart, but stay in touch. So while Corona goes against all of ideas of togetherness and contact and the bonds that we make with children, we can find some kind of way to get around that. So even though children are not necessarily at greater risk of transmitting infection than others, but they're less likely to wash their hands, they may have more physical contact. So we have to protect them and keep these generations apart, unless they're part of a capsule and they're not being exposed to the world, the children. Once again, you have to look at the guilt. There's a lot of guilt around this, the guilt of the children, but if they're young, they're not there yet. But what about the parents? The parents are stuck in the middle. You know, what if my child gets my parents sick? What if my child gets the grandparents sick? That's very, very difficult. So the dangers of not seeing the grandchildren on the one hand are the dangers are difficult at an emotional level, but they definitely outweigh the alternative. And therefore, we have to be creative and encourage common projects. I have a mother-in-law who was in research and biotech, and now that my daughter is in high school and studying biology and science, and I encouraged the two of them to discuss what they learn at school, and that over Zoom, over some kind of video connection, and that is wonderful. That their relationship has been intensified over Corona. That's not something they would have done before. Daily reads together. I have a younger child, and I encourage every night my younger child to read a book together with her grandfather over some kind of video connection, and they do that. They would do that every night in the times where they had no connection, and that was their special time that they had together. The special time. There are many games now. They call it the Zoom games that grandparents can play with their grandchildren. Once a week, if it's appropriate, you can. I know of some grandparents who prepare a special Parshat Shavua, the portion of the week, with the grand, and every Friday they talk together, meet together over video, and they go over that, and it's their special time. It's called, this is my special time with my grandparents. Some have even considered doing homeschooling with their grandparents, so they don't go to school, they just go to the parents, but that has its own issues, and it's something we don't have time to get at. So sometimes there's a lot of frustration involved, big frustration due to this, and some of the younger children particularly have these breakdowns, and I saw that once with one of my children, where she just had this breakdown over Rosh Hashanah for 2 minutes, and because she wanted to go and give her grandmother a hug, and there's a lot of frustration, and just listen here. Talk about it, express love, and feelings can be expressed even when they're not in the same place. So you can encourage the children and the grandchildren to talk more frequently by phone, and say to them, give the child the responsibility to even initiate that. And there's so many kind of applications, WhatsApp, Skype, FaceTime, Google, there's so many things. You can say, okay, once a day you come home, once a day, and you share one happy thing with your grandparent that you saw, or you ate, or you did, or give a compliment. Share something, and then you can tell the grandparent it's your duty to share something with a memory, an interesting memory from the past. And you're fostering an aspect of the relationship that even though you can't be in the same place, you can still make your relationship a very, very special one. And I would argue to say even a better one. Sometimes you can organize remote play dates with your grandparents. And this is something that can be done, and it wasn't done before. For example, when people live cities apart, or even states apart. Many people in Canada have family in Israel, and with the mainstreaming of video technology, this can be used now to foster a closer relationship. It's something that wasn't there before. Now, even though the younger children and the teenagers may have a lot of knowledge of technology, which is more difficult for the grandparents have wisdom. And the children and adolescents are thirsty for that wisdom. It just needs to be opened up to them, and they need to be exposed to it. And the middle generation, or the sandwich generation, will have to foster that kind of connection and show the grandchildren and the grandparents that they can connect over in a very unique and a special way. So sometimes the grandchildren can help the grandparents learn the technology for the connection, and it's not so easy sometimes for more elder people to understand or get to the process of Zoom and all these other technologies that are out there. But once it's done, the grandparents then it's just a medium for them to pass over the wisdom. So love at a sensible distance is definitely possible. In a virtual way, but even in a physical way. And this is something else I want to mention. That when we do psychotherapy, when you sit in an office and both sides of a mask and they're 2 meters apart, or 2 meters in between, you're safe. You don't need to go into isolation. At least that's what the guidelines in Israel state today. So you can meet today with grandparents. Best is outside. Keep the distance, keep the mask on, and if there's a significant distance, and some would say that masks are not even important, even I would recommend masks, but that's part of the experience. Go for a walk. Take the dogs to walk together. Go do something special outside together. Encourage and foster that. Okay, so sometimes you can't sit around the table and have tea and cake together with the grandparent, but go outside and do that. That should continue. So this can be used as an opportunity once again to teach children ways to express their feelings and emotions in other ways besides the physical. When was the last time that children wrote a card to their grandparents? And even emails is not used as much. Write a poem to your grandparent. Tell the grandparent to write a poem encourage the grandparent, never tell, encourage or suggest maybe the grandparent could write a poem to the grandchild and read it together on some kind of video format. But be honest. Explain to the children what is going on. Children can pick it up. Explain that the virus affects elderly people different from children, and that it's likely to spread when you're together and when you're not seeing them one-on-one close up. It helps protect you from getting the virus to them and for them getting sick. Let them know this is only temporary, and then once this is over, and it will be over, validate their feelings. Reassure them that it's okay to miss having a connection with their grandparent. Invite them to share the experience. Express how you're feeling as well. We sometimes hold back our emotions. We think that that's destabilizing for children and from our parents, but it's not. It's not. They only grow from it. And don't underestimate the power of humor sometimes to deal with. Hugs from a distance, virtual hugs. Encourage children to find some sort of way to develop those virtual hugs. Encourage managing adversity. Children learn from us how to deal with stress and sudden change. This could be, and this is maybe the most important thing I want to say tonight. This could be the most important learning experience of your children's lives. Don't drop the ball. We have a unique experience, a unique opportunity to show children how to deal with adversity in a way that can optimize them with other adversity for the rest of their lives in a better way. You know, Viktor Frankl is a psychiatrist. Many people have heard of him, who went through the Holocaust, or Shoah. He said many different special things, but one of the things he said was that when we're no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So we're in a situation now that we can't change. We have no control over this corona thing, and please God, we'll have a vaccination soon. But in the meantime, don't drop the ball. Use this experience to help children manage difficult situations in a positive way. They can learn very important tools here. And this is the essence of fostering resilience. So we know that from people who've gone through really difficult situations in life, that really what fosters resilience, and they did studies, and doctors, for example, at Auschwitz, was having a warm home background is critical to fostering resilience. So for children who had a warm background, not the wealthiest children, the wealthiest families or most educated, but those who had a warm family background and an open background, non-condemning background, those are the ones who managed, who had the resilience to come through many difficult situations. So we shouldn't project our worries onto our children, because they actually adapt much better than we think. You know, my wife comes from a refuseniks family. For 9 years, they were refuseniks. And when people say, what was it like? What the stress of being refuseniks? And she doesn't remember having so much stress, because her parents spoke about it very openly. And then when things are open and parents can share that with the children and say, you know, we can deal with this, and the child can still be happy. Don't be scared to share concern, but show the process of how to deal with it. Once again, we're back to an opportunity. Use this whole corona thing as an opportunity to foster emotional development in your child, to say, okay, so we have this challenge that you can't go and give your hug to your grandmother, but how can we get around that? How can we still make a special relationship between you and grandmother despite the challenge that we have here? So we're building, fostering life skills. That is much more important over this period than any piece of knowledge, for example, that they're going to get from school. So you know, even we say, oh, you know, they're not really learning anything at school right now because it's a whole mess. They're learning a bit of Zoom here, learning a bit of Zoom, and they come home and it's a mess. The knowledge that they're missing from school over these couple of months can be picked up very quickly. But the life skills that they can pick up of dealing with adversity and dealing with fostering relationships and dealing with these emotional responses that are going around here are immense. Don't miss the opportunity. You know, sometimes, you know, people use in North America, the stock exchange is very much in the conversation and everything. And, so, you know, sometimes when the stock exchange goes really down, so, you know, the people who really do well, they're just like, okay, I see this as an opportunity. So too here. So we're in a crisis right now, but it could be the most amazing opportunity to foster lifelong skills with our children in terms of relationship and with others around, and their friends, their parents, and their grandparents, which is immense. So the opportunity to teach life skills in many different areas: finance, explore managing change, encouraging children to talk about the difficulties. So for example, this plexiglass enclosure. So in life, it's not, you teach a child, okay, so this is unpleasant. You can't do exactly what you want to do. We are limited by certain things and many things right now. But in life, and this is critical, in life, it's not what happens to you that's so important, but how you deal with it. We have little control over what happens to us in life, but we have all the control for how we deal with what happens to us in life. So we have a challenging situation for grandparents and children. Grandparents say, okay, so how can I deal with the situation? I'm not able to give my grandchild a hug. Okay, but now you're challenged to try and find a way how we can deal with this and make it a very positive experience. It can be done. And obviously it depends on where the child is at. Teenagers, for example, are particularly frustrated about the situation because they really need their friends. Social distancing is extremely difficult, and therefore, and that's where many of the barriers. they arguably the most dangerous when they come home, because they feel invincible, teenagers and college students, and therefore they're not protecting those boundaries. And then grandparents and parents have to deal with that. So sometimes grandparents and parents can share with the children and the adolescents and the students about healthy life habits, learning, sleep, routine, validate their disappointment. Teenagers and college students can express. They even though, you know, some would say that their frontal lobes are not so well developed, especially teenagers, and therefore they respond many times in an impulsive way. Validate the inputs, be with them, listen to them, let them express their frustration. Make dinner, for example, something where you can actually time to be with them. Make dinner transition time between the regular day and the evening when they come home. You know, I believe very much in this concept of sacred space. There's certain places where there's no technology. There's certain places where there's no cell phone, no screens. For example, I think that when you drive in a car, children put away their screens. That's a time to connect with them and talk with them and have some kind of downtime and actually get into their world. Kitchen, dining room, for example, of course. So everyone can choose for themselves, but find those sacred space where there's no technology, no screen. Talk to them about what was your favorite part of today. Encourage the grandchildren to talk with if your grandparent. Talk to your grandchild. What is your favorite? Ask open questions. If the question is yes or no, then the conversation's over in a few seconds. But what was the favorite part of today? Not how was your day good today? Yes, no. Well, what were you grateful? What did you learn today? So in fact, we can use this as a time to intensify grandparenting in many different novel ways, especially, by the way, with grandchildren on the spectrum, because that's another whole discussion in itself on the autistic spectrum, because sometimes, you know, there's so much, there are many grandchildren today on the spectrum, and they need a particular connection. So how can we, you know, you need to find some kind of novel ways of connecting. Everyone has that way, and it can be a really, really exciting time to do that. Virtual time together between the generations can be an incredible gift. It's now part of the life. It's going to be over in a couple of months, and you know what's going to happen? I predict in a couple of months, when this is all over and this just becomes a bad memory, we can say, wow, we missed the opportunity to really make that something very special, or to gain something from that. So it's not just, oh, this is crisis that we're dealing with. We can actually turn it around and find something very positive about it. But that time we are losing, because this is going to be over in a couple of months, we shouldn't miss that opportunity. Sometimes this virtual childcare where grandchildren can connect with their grandparents over the video can be very, very special, can even bring the family closer together. Grandchildren can still give meaning and lives to the grandparents, even if you can't give physical hugs, just that the medium of doing that is different. We have to go with the flow. We have to adapt. So that can be done, and it's an opportunity. Depends how you look at it. So once again, don't forget to care for the caregiver, and the caregiver here can be the parent, can be the grandparent. So you have to look after yourself in order to maintain these relationships: healthy eating, exercise, friends. You know, they did studies and they looked at what are the two most important things that predict longevity in middle age. So it's not marriage, it's not having children, it's not smoking, and having friends. Encourage yourself to connect with friends, and friends also can be used over medium. So find, if you know, if sometimes when the children are at school and people feel lonely, like, connect, reach out to friends much more. And then this is going to be over soon, but we want to make sure that when this is over, we've not only fostered and got over this time and just survived, but we're actually in a much better place since we've gone through it. You know, there's the story in the rabbinical story of the father who went overseas and then got lost, went on the ship. This is a few hundred years ago, and then never came back for a year or two. And who was most upset was obviously the spouse, and then the children, and then the friends. So there was this ripple effect around this father who left. And then after 3 years, he came back. And who was the most happy? Obviously the spouse, because she was the most upset, and then the children, and then the ripple effect. So whoever was most upset, whoever was mostly involved in the situation, they were most happy when this is over. So I think we can look at the situation for the corona as well. Those who most engage in the situation and try and make the best of it and find some creative ways to go, not only just to survive the situation, but actually to thrive under the situation. When this is all over, those people, I believe, will be in a much better place and will appreciate the time, rather than those who say, okay, we just got through it and we survived. But this can be a pivotal moment in people's lives, especially in children, if it's done in the right way. And it can even, as I say, I really, really believe that it can encourage and even make better that relationship with the grandchild and the child, if it's looked at in the right way. So just to end off now, Viktor Frankl said that everything can be taken away from a man, but the one thing, the last of human's freedom, is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So between stimulus, he said, and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So we have this opportunity, and it can be done. It can be done. We can come out of this in a better situation, in a stronger situation, even though there's this crisis of being alone and isolated and the frustration that's all there. And anxiety, but let's use that in a positive way and get closer over the situation. And then once this is all over, we'll all be in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Strous. As one of those parents who, or grandparents, who has a child in Israel, and also children actually who live not too far from me, you know, I'm also feel suffering sort of withdrawal from seeing them. And you know, as you were talking, both my wife and I were taking notes of tips of what we can do. There were a lot of questions that came in, and what I tried to do is to put them in order demographically, so that we can deal with the sort of 3 different generations. And the first question has to do with preteen young children. What are the signs should I be looking for in my preteen young children, which might indicate that they're not coping with this new environment?
There are many considerations. If you see a child who's expressing a change in behavior, withdrawal is often a common one. Change in academic performance, not wanting connection with friends, not wanting to talk, and expressing behavioral change. Could be violence, could be apathy. Just be in touch and be in touch with that change, and the child's not going to come out and say, look, I'm having these problems, but inquire, just be there, be there with the child. And sometimes these things come out in situations that one doesn't realize. Have some downtime with them. Go cook together in the kitchen, and you'll see things will come out. Let's go for a walk and listen to some music. Let's go biking together. Let's put together some photo albums. Let's invite a virtual guest over some kind of a video medium, and let's talk with a family member from far that we haven't done. So, and then things will come up. Things will come up in the situation. For example, when you drive somewhere with make sure there are no screens, as I mentioned, and things come up. Things come up. Just be connected with the child. It sometimes takes time, but it comes out. And just be there, and just be there for the child, and tell them that. And you know what? There's every person, every child, every adult, even there's always one person that they'll listen to, and it might not be you. It might be your spouse. It might be an aunt and uncle. It might be a cousin. Engage other people if things are really in a particular bad situation.
Thank you. This question is with reference to a parent, with reference to a teenager. is how can I deal with my teenage child who has ADD and is increasingly anxious about the situation and needing a COVID test every few days?
So sometimes in a situation like that, sit down and let's talk about the biology. Let's talk, and you may need to get a professional, you may need to get your family doctor involved, and to explain whether it has any particular value. And really what's underlying that is the anxiety of the situation. So it's like, okay, we have a situation that's difficult. We understand that you're going through it, and maybe the child needs to talk about it with someone. And if it helps just to limit that, but not necessarily every few days, but to do it but less, depending what the guidelines are, the medical guidelines, and the availability of those kind of tests. Whatever can be done to improve that situation, I would get a professional involved. But once again, acknowledge and validate your children's experience. It's all okay. It's okay, but the most important thing is to try and find some way for them to express that. Encourage sport. Sport is a massively underutilized modality of managing anxiety and stress in children, especially today when children are not going to school, and when they do, the sport is the first thing that drops. Sport should be encouraged. It's a massive leveling experience and helpful.
Thank you. I can empathize with this question. I'm not sure whether it's COVID related or whether it's just related to when children get older and move out of your house. I'm anxious about my university daughter not being able to come home for the Chagim, for the holidays. She's no longer in my bubble, and I feel as if I've lost her.
So then the question is, why anxiety? Well, first of all, we have to come to terms with how we're feeling and why we're feeling like that. So and who we caring about most right now. So and what am I caring about, and what is the loss? So there are a lot of emotions, obviously, especially when it comes around holiday times. But the bottom line is, the reality is that it's dangerous if they come home in that situation, if that's what's decided. And therefore, at the end of the day, you know it's in your child's best interest and your best interest, obviously, that they don't come home. Because if they would get home and someone would get sick, the guilt and the danger is obvious. So the reality just has to be addressed, and that's mindfulness. You know, today in psychiatry and psychology, one of the newest modalities of dealing with situations is this whole mindfulness movement, to say, be in the present. And being in the present is looking at the reality and saying, what is going on right now? Not what my emotions from the past or my emotions with all the baggage that goes with it. Let me be in the here and now right now. And the here and now right now is to say, that kind of situation is dangerous. And I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm feeling anxious, even though I feel much more anxious if they came home, but I can deal with it. And express it and talk to your child about it. And sometimes it can be a way for you to even become closer to your children, because maybe you're expressing some kind of weakness with your child, that the child is saying, wow, my parent is real, my parent is with me. I didn't know that it's so upsetting for them. I didn't realize how important it was for me to come in. And when they do come home, think about how special that will be when they can come home under safe conditions when that happens, and it will happen. But if we lose this opportunity to grow closer, despite the challenges and despite the adversity under the situation, it would be such a pity, because so much can be gained from that. And you're right, it is overwhelming, and it is very difficult, and it is very upsetting, it is so disappointing. But that's the reality. The question is, how do I deal with that reality? How can I deal with reality in a way? And therefore, once again, you can use many creators. We're gonna have a national or international Zoom connection with all our family just before the festival, and it's gonna be special. And it's gonna be difficult, but it's gonna be our family. And we're gonna write letters. We're gonna decide to write something special to each other. And there's so many endless options of dealing with that kind of crisis. But it is a crisis. But use this crisis as an opportunity under the circumstances. And everyone, there's always a worse off situation. There's always a worse off situation. And ranging from the obvious, if they came home and God forbid someone got really, really sick and was compromised, to some people of financial devastation, and some of medium difficulty. So there's always a worse off situation. And to say, well, this is reality right now. May this be the worst part of it for me right now, and let's find a way to deal with it, and deal with it in a way that even though it's difficult, how can my child learn from me how I'm dealing with this, for when they, in 20 years time, when they faced with some kind of adversity, they learn from this to deal with it in a healthier manner, and a growth enhancing manner.
Thank you. This question is from a parent. As the situation continues, I feel that I'm becoming dependent on outside stimulants to cope and escape. Many of my friends are sharing similar concerns. Is this to be expected, and what should be done?
That's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be human. It's okay to say, okay, right now, under the situations, what's going to help me is to eat more chocolate right now, but that's, or to watch more movies, or to read more online books, or to reach out to friends that I've never had contact with for the last 20 years. Whatever it does for you right now, we have to deal with it. We have to find some kind of way in a healthy manner to deal with it. But make sure that it's there are ways to deal with crisis. Sometimes can be maladaptive. For example, alcohol, drugs. That's also a way to deal with it. That's your challenge. Once again, life is not what happens to you that's so important, because we have no control, but it's how you deal with it. So right now, what helps you is if people need outside stimulation, that's okay, but make it in a positive way, and find some kind of outside stimulation that can be used in a positive way to maybe help the world or help other people, or to develop yourself, or to expand yourself. And that could be studies, whatever. There's so much out there today. We can say, thank God, right, that we have technology, that, if technology wasn't around 20 years ago, if we would have had this corona thing, we would have been in a much worse situation. So much more can be done now because we have the technology. So we have to put it all in perspective and not miss this opportunity to try and make it a really, really potentially special experience. When this is all over, we look back and say, wow, I never dropped the ball. I actually used it in a positive way with this and this. And, maybe I could have done a bit better, whatever. But at least I found something to come out of this in a way that makes me in a better place, and special people around me also in a better place.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to close actually with what I see as a very positive question. The question is, I guess the question, part of this experience, or I guess the question of this experience is, how do we keep this closeness going when life normalizes?
So once again, that in itself is a challenge. And I think that the perspectives and the insights and the world has changed. The world has changed, and the world is changing. So how can I come? When I come out of this, what am I going to take from this? I know that a lot of people are writing letters to themselves, writing diaries. People are really planning for that, and it will be such a pity that when we come out of this, and we are going to come out of this, that we aren't in a better place, and the world is not in a better place, and everyone has to find that medium for themselves. And there's no one there's no one clear thing, okay, everyone has to find that for themselves. And sometimes having a bit of time for yourself and mindfulness, thinking about, planning out, like how can I come out of this in a better place? How can my family come out of this? How can my relationships come out of this in a better place? And start planning that now with those special people around you. And maybe that sometimes can be a family experience, a family initiative. And sometimes with teenagers in particular, that can be done over the social media. Sometimes teenagers find it difficult to sit down and talk about, oh, there go the parents talking their philosophy. But if you do it over the social media, go into their space and encourage them to do that in their what's most comfortable with them. There can be amazing things come out of it. And often grandparents and grandchildren can sometimes skip over that middle generation. We actually see that with the Holocaust stories, with often grandparents share with their grandchildren much more than they shared with their own children. They skip that generation. So I think that a lot of that is also coming out now with the Corona time, and that should be fostered also in a very positive manner.
Thank you very much, Dr. Strous, Professor Strous. I know that your words and your wisdom comforted many people this evening and provided some excellent direction for them in dealing with it. Really is an unprecedented time. The Mayanei Yeshua Medical Center and Mental Health Center are independent institutions. They rely heavily on support from friends around the world. Together, we help the doctors save lives and return patients to their families and livelihoods. The hospital and the mental health center needs are significant. They've increased dramatically over the past few months as the population in the Psychiatry area suffer from both the physical and mental effects of this pandemic. We invite you to visit our website at the Canadian Friends of Mayanei Yeshua and learn about this amazing institution and its work. We encourage you to add our hospital to the various charities that you support, and we thank you for your consideration. In closing, and in requesting your support for our institution, we quote from Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Tarfon said, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo ata ben chori levatel mimenu. You're not required to complete the task, yet you are also not free to withdraw from it. We wish you a Gemar Chatima Tova. May you and your families be inscribed for a year of health and fulfillment. May we quickly witness a cure for the pandemic which is plaguing the world, and may we see world peace in our time. Erev Tov, thank you for participating in our webinar. Mar Chatima Tova.